Hey, it's Tim at the University of Vinyl. Thanks for tuning in again today. I'm going to be switching gears today. I've been talking about a lot of classic rock titles as part of my continuing series called The Crown Jewels. Check out the playlist if you haven't seen any of those videos. I'm featuring what I feel are 50 of the best sounding records in my collection. I'm doing 50 videos throughout the course of this year. So I needed to change gears. And I thought I would go back to country, another one of my loves that I really don't do a lot of videos on this channel. The last one I did was over a year ago. I looked it up. It's called Honky Tonk Heroes, I believe. And, you know, I noticed that I was wearing a beloved hat of mine in that video. It was a Stetson open road. And the hat never fit me properly. It was too big. And I ended up last summer putting that thing on Facebook Marketplace. And I'll never forget this. I put it on Facebook Marketplace on a Saturday morning, and it was sold in 3 hours. I didn't lose money on it. It just so happens that there was a George Strait concert that night in Denver at Mile High Stadium. So a huge concert, and some guy needed a Stetson hat for the show. Rolled up in his truck, picked up the hat, gave me my money, and he was on his way to the show. Great story. But I was thinking, well, I'd like to wear another hat for this video because it's another country video. And, you know, what I've done in the last, after I sold that hat, I went out and found a Stetson Stratoliner. This is kind of a lower profile version of the open road. I've got another issue with this. It's too tight. This is a 7 1/8. I can't even remember what the open road was. So kind of frustrating. I'd like to have a nice Stetson hat that fits me. Here in Colorado, you're not out of place if you wear a cowboy hat out occasionally. There's an old school steakhouse that my wife and I will go to on the east side of Fort Collins occasionally. And it's funny because on a Saturday night, which is really the only night that we would go there, maybe a Friday night, there would be all these guys there in their huge cowboy hats, and you kind of knew that they were coming in off the range, the plains, or down from Wyoming, which is only 35 minutes north of where we are here in Fort Collins. So always kind of a fun night out. Haven't been there in a long time. I'm going to try and rein back to my original thought. So, want to do a country-themed video, and one of my favorite stories is, you know, the James Taylor record from 1977, JT. By the way, this is a great sounding record, mastered extremely well, produced well, engineered well, of course. And JT had all of his kind of usual suspects with him. Lee Sklar on bass guitar, Danny Korchmar on lead guitar. He had Dan Dugmore on steel guitar. And the song I want to talk about today is Bartender's Blues. That was released on this record, and it was the flip side to the Handyman single. Great song on this record, as was Your Smiling Face. What a great song. This, of course, was a gatefold record. There you go. Produced by Peter Asher. Kind of the gold standard as far as production is concerned. Working with James Taylor, all of these records sounded great. There was always a great mix of songs on these albums, and this came out in 1977. So, Bartender's Blues. James Taylor is doing pure country on this track. And again, Dan Dugmore had an incredible pedal steel run.
Money at home. I see lots of sad faces, lots of bad cases of folks with their backs to the wall.
throughout the song. And it's kind of interesting, you know, usually these honky-tonk songs are, oh, woe is me, you know, I'm talking to the bartender and I've got so many problems and my wife left me. James Taylor flipped the paradigm here, and it was from the bartender's point of view. So a little bit of an interesting take. But when this record was released and that single came out, the flip side, guess who heard that song? Billy Sherrill. Billy Sherrill was, of course, the very famous countrypolitan producer from Nashville. He was known for really kind of making the Nashville sound what we now know it as. And the classic Nashville sound, you know, it's been kind of marginalized. If you want to hear the classic country sound, the Nashville sound that Billy Sherrill engineered and, you know, put it on the map, you need to go back and listen to Tammy Wynette with George Jones. You need to listen to Charlie Rich. You need to listen to all of those solo records from George Jones after he divorced Tammy Wynette the first time. I don't know how many times they were married. But some of those records are just very, very smooth, very, very polished. Of course, he would usually have a string section and just great sound, incredibly dry drum sounds on those records. And I love all of them. I'm delving deeper and deeper into those, into that whole decade between 1970 and 1980. When I'm going to record shows, I do have kind of a hit list of albums I'm looking for. And some of these records are not easy to find. So Billy Sherrill heard Bartender's Blues, and the first person he called was George Jones. He said, George, you got to hear this song. James Taylor is doing you. And George Jones listened to it and said, holy shit, well, I guess we need to cut this thing. And he got with Billy. They brought in the usual suspects that were on most of Billy's records, most of George Jones's records, Pete Drake on pedal steel, of course, and they cut Bartender's Blues. And the version that George Jones put out as a single shot up to number 6 on the Billboard country chart.
Lots of bad cases of folks with their backs to the wall. But I need 4 walls around me to hold my life, to keep me from going in.
And then it was included on the 1978 album titled Bartender's Blues. There it is. Kind of interesting here. We have 2 different headshots. Of course, this is black and white, but similar look and feel. Very interesting. Now, in 1978, there's George on the back cover. 1978, George Jones was not in a great place. The fact that that song, his version of Bartender's Blues, shot up to number 6 was kind of a godsend. He hadn't had a top 10 hit in 3 or 4 years. And, you know, in the ensuing years, you know, since 1975, I think it was his last number 1 hit was 1975. Might have been with Tammy Wynette. He had become a raging cocaine addict. He had kicked amphetamines in the early 70s that had caused him problems in the late 60s. He had managed to kick amphetamines, but one of his producers had introduced him to cocaine because George had complained about being too tired to go on in one particular night. Of course, George had become known as No-Show George because he missed and canceled tons of concerts. No show. at the last minute. A lot of pissed off people. That, and then the cocaine issue, the drinking, the problems with Tammy Wynette that really sent George Jones into a tailspin. It was all that Billy Sherrill could do to kind of keep the wheels in motion on George Jones's recording career. This was a great opportunity, and it turned out good for George and Billy. So this record is quite interesting. Again, 1978. The JT record came out in June of 77. So these guys, particularly George, was motivated and was able to move quite quickly and quite swiftly and put this thing up on the charts. Now, if you listen to the version by George Jones, and Billy Sherrill has talked about this in interviews later on, retrospective interviews looking at his career, looking back at George Jones, his time with George Jones. Billy said, you know what? It's not my favorite George Jones performance. He really kind of overdid it. And George Jones did overdo it. There's like so many different... George Jones would take one sentence out of a track and there would be 4 different octaves. His voice was just doing, theatrics, and it was kind of a roller coaster ride of a listen, but unmistakably George Jones. But he really kind of played it to the hilt, almost a caricature of himself. But have you heard Bartender's Blues? I really recommend... Is that going to be the cover? I recommend that you listen to this first, then listen to George Jones's version. If you don't have the records, go stream it. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Music. But a real fun listen. I've got to give a hat tip to an incredible podcast called Cocaine and Rhinestones. It's a great history of country music, sprawling series of podcasts by David Allan Coe's son. Check out Cocaine and Rhinestones if you've never heard it. The most recent season of episodes, he featured several episodes about George Jones and Tammy Wynette, and then focusing on George Jones and his problems. It got so bad with George Jones that, he had to declare bankruptcy. He was $1 million in debt. He signed a contract with a hotel baron out of Indiana that had all of these really nice hotels that had, showcase theaters attached to them. George was interested in that notion because, they had to buy him a new tour bus. He signed a contract. He wouldn't have to travel far, didn't have to hop on any airplane, and would be able to kind of drive to these shows within 2 to 3 hours of Nashville or Alabama, depending on where he was based at the time. And it should have been easy. He took a huge advance. They bought him a brand new tour bus, and he still proceeded to cancel show after show after show on that kind of agreement that he had done. So George Jones is a curious case. He finally cleaned up his act, got remarried, moved on from Tammy Wynette, somehow cleaned up his act, and it's just amazing. But I love the kind of interplay between the James Taylor song and George Jones. And by the way, George and Billy called James and had him overtrack his backing vocal, which you will find on the George Jones version of Bartender's Blues. James Taylor is credited on the back cover. Vocal accompaniment, James Taylor. So great sounding record. Billy Sherrill production. This is an incredible record. Peter Asher production. The recording engineer on this was the great Val Gary. And this was mastered at the Mastering Lab by Doug Sachs. He's credited on the back cover, and a breathtaking listen. Really, really fine late 1970s pop album with that little country anomaly on it that turned into a really cool story. So Thanks for watching again, everybody. Please don't forget to subscribe if you like my videos. Like the video. Check out the merch in the shop. Have you heard about the Babylon Sisters Steely Dan t-shirt? It's taking the vinyl community by storm. Those are in the shop. Thanks again. Take care.